Football Report powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. The Eagles are back. Football is back. We'll dive in to a little bit of Eagles. Andrew's been at training camp. Our division previews continue. We're getting down to the wire here. We'll look at the NFC South today, which is a wide-open, fun division. Falcons, Panthers, Saints, and Buccaneers. We know the Eagles played the Bucs in the playoffs last year. They got knocked out there. Who's the favorite there? A lot of new faces in that division. We'll take a look at it with Andrew DiCecco here from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast as he joins us for Football at 4 on this Thursday edition. Andrew, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Mike, doing well. How are you?
All is good, brother. We're getting ready for, obviously, the Hall of Fame game next week. The Eagles on the 9th and the start of training camp. You've been at camp the last couple of days, so let's start there and just get a couple of overview thoughts on some of the news and notes that have kind of stood out as you've been at the NovaCare complex.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts looks really sharp. He's on time. He's keeping the offense on schedule. It looks like he's really taken the playbook from the spring and digested it, and he's operating at a higher level, and he's much more decisive in where he needs to go with the football, and he's keeping the ball out of harm's way. I think that's a testament to how quickly he's able to process things, and when you look at it in terms of him having so many different coordinators over the years, I think him being so adaptable is really going to serve him well in this offense. And then for me, it's on the defensive side, it's the constant shuffling of the personnel to really gauge where you're at in terms of how certain players may fit in, because it's Keely Ringo starting today. Yesterday was Isaiah Rodgers starting at corner opposite Darius Slay. Then you're seeing a linebacker carousel of sorts with obviously Devin White being the headliner there at the linebacker spot, but you also have Zach Vaughn and you have Nakobe Dean that are rotating back and forth with the first team. And Van Sumeren's also getting some looks with the second. Well, he's played with the second team primarily. So you're seeing a lot of mixing and matching, and I think Vic really wants to better gauge his personnel and find out what their strengths are so he can optimize what they're able to do.
That secondary that everybody's wondering what's happening there, has there been any standouts or anything that you can read the tea leaves on in that battle?
I mean, it's too early really to make that determination. I think all players have flashed at certain points in terms of just the starters, the first-team players. Quinyon Mitchell has seen second-team reps. He's been working inside. He's played outside, so I thought that was an interesting wrinkle that I was not expecting because I didn't really grade him as an inside corner coming out, but he's actually looks pretty natural in doing so. So I think him being able to prove that versatility really sort of accelerates him being able to contribute defensively, especially in light of Cooper DeJean being missing 3 weeks with the hamstring injury. I think that's particularly interesting. I thought Keely Ringo had some nice plays as well, and the vocal prowess of C.J. Gardner-Johnson and directing traffic back there, communicating, getting guys lined up, I think is really going to be a paramount and essential element to the defense. And you look at last season, they didn't have a lot of communication, so I think he's going to help a ton in that regard.
Yeah, we are all looking forward to that. Day 2 at Eagles camp. Andrew DiCecco is covering it for Inside the Birds, and, of course, we'll have it here on Football at 4. We've been doing our division previews as we do every year with Andrew. Give you a little look at some of the teams all around football. Last year, the Tampa Bay Bucs finished 9-8 in the AFC North, but they won a wild card game against the Philadelphia Eagles. And you take a look at this Tampa Bay team as a division winner a year ago, Andrew. They brought back Baker Mayfield. They gave him that 3-year deal. Mike Evans is still there. Chris Godwin is still there. This is a team that looks a lot like the team on offense that left the field last year against Philadelphia.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Baker Mayfield there at quarterback, Rashad White at running back. At center, you drafted Graham Barton so that in the first round, so that's an interesting element to add to the offensive line, which should help that unit churn along. Then they also have Mike Evans, Trey Palmer, and Chris Godwin at wide receiver, so I really like their contingent that they have there. Mike Evans is perennially one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. He gets 1,000 yards every year, and that's sort of taken for granted, but I think that the Buccaneers have a good enough offense even with Baker Mayfield back there that they should be able to make some headway in their division.
This is a team that a couple of years ago won a Super Bowl, had that awesome defense. Devin White was a part of that defense. David, Cansey, Vea, Logan Hall, Winfield. I mean, this is a pretty good defense here.
Yeah, Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, the undersized defensive lineman from Pittsburgh. Those are two cornerstone players that they have on their defensive line. Levante David's still there. And then on the defensive backfield, Antoine Winfield is one of the best safeties in the NFL. And they also have Zion McCollum, who has he's been in and out of the starting lineup, been a prominent rotational player, been a starter. The Eagles, of course, have Zion's twin brother, Tristan McCollum, who is a safety here in Philadelphia. So I think that's kind of a cool storyline.
All right, Andrew, the other team in that division, the Atlanta Falcons, some people think this is the favorite. They went out and got Kirk Cousins to lead an offense that has a lot of high draft choices devoted. They went out and got Bijan Robinson. Drake London was a pick. Kyle Pitts was a big pick. So was this offense with Kirk Cousins ready to overtake Tampa Bay in the NFC South?
It certainly should be, because Kirk Cousins obviously is being well compensated, but I think he's a quarterback that is sort of dismissed, and his accomplishments in the regular season are minimized, but he should be able to elevate that offense significantly. Now, whether they make any headway in the postseason, that remains to be seen. But when you look at an offense that has Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, who's a pretty interesting movable piece that they have, he needs to stay healthy. Kyle Pitts is a sort of an enigma at tight end that should be someone who should factor more prominently in the red zone than he really has, and be more of a vertical option in that offense. And then running back Bijan Robinson, I think that you have a full gamut of weapons at your disposal. And I think Kirk Cousins has proven that he's someone who can, optimize the players that he has at the skill position and find ways to generate offense. And I think that's what they're going to do.
All right, Andrew, you take a look at that offense, definitely with Cousins, gives them a little bit more stability at that position. Defensively, though, where is this Falcons team? Is this a good enough defense to hold up their end of the bargain?
I don't think that they have enough players defensively to really make themselves a viable contender in that division. Unless their offense is this otherworldly unit that can outscore teams, they're going to have a hard time, at least in my estimation. The three players that I think offer the most intrigue are safety Jesse Bates, cornerback A.J. Terrell, and then they drafted linebacker Braylon Trice in the third round. I think he has traits that lend itself to being able to be an early contributor, but again, that's a projection. You don't know, but they don't have a lot to offer defensively that really moves the needle, in my opinion.
All right, let's go to New Orleans. Derek Carr is the quarterback there, and of course, Kamara, Chris Olave. They've got some interesting weapons there. This looks like an offense, though, that they brought Carr in thinking that was going to upgrade. He's been kind of inconsistent there. So where do you see this Saints offense?
Well, I'm pretty high on, not so much as on Chris Olave, but Rashid Shaheed, who was recently compensated. I think he's a really good story out of Weber State. Good speed option, someone who I think has become more of a three-level threat, explosive player. So he gives you that vertical element. Chris Olave gives you more of that possession, or someone who's going to command a ton of targets, but maybe not take the top off of a defense. They drafted Talise Fuaga in the first round out of Oregon State. He's going to be their left tackle, and that's going to complement what they have in the backfield with quarterback Derek Carr and running back Alvin Kamara. So I like what they have. And Juwan Johnson, I believe, is on the PUP list, their tight end. So if it wasn't for that, I would feel a lot more confident, because I think Juwan Johnson's a good red zone option and kind of gives them an edge in that area. But nevertheless, it's still a pretty good unit, at least the way it looks on paper.
Yeah, the Carr signing there hasn't really worked out, I guess, the way they thought it would. We'll see if Kamara has anything left in the tank. They have one of my favorite players, name-wise, Equimonius St. Brown is one of the receivers on that team. Defensively here, Cam Jordan and crew, you take a look at that. This is the whole roster. You got some interesting names here, but it just feels kind of like a middle-of-the-pack type of teteam.
Yeah, you're right. And when you look at their defensive line, Carl Granderson I did not like him coming out of Wyoming. But it's interesting when sidebar, when you look at that Wyoming defense, that's where he played, and he was on that line, and they had Tyler Hall, who's now with the Eagles. He was a corner. They had Marcus Epps. They had Andrew Wingard, and they had Logan Wilson at linebacker. So it's kind of interesting that all those players play for that defense. But I don't really think that he brings much in terms of being a every down starter to that defense. Colin Saunders was a player who flashed throughout the draft process, very athletic, but he's bounced around a little bit. Never really made his mark. Cam Jordan really is their centerpiece still at his advanced age, so he's going to have to be someone who they lean on heavily. I just don't know that he has. I don't know if that's fair at this stage of his career. But linebackers, that's where they get. That's where they sort of move the needle, in my opinion. They have Demario Davis, Willie Gay, who they added, and Marshawn Lattimore is perennially one of the best corners in the NFL. So I think their second and third levels are a lot more appealing than the defensive line.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, Inside the Birds and Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, training camp is here. We're taking a look at the NFC North in our division previews. You go to Carolina, had the number 1 pick last year, would have had the number 1 pick again this year. They took Bryce Young. Where is that offense in year number 2 with Bryce Young? Even looking around, you're saying, it's not a whole heck of a lot of attractive options here.
No, I mean, no spoiler here. They're going to probably finish last in this division. I just don't think they have enough offensively to really support a second-year quarterback in Bryce Young. Yes, you've added Jonathan Brooks, the running back in the second round from Texas, but he's on the NFI list, so you don't know when he's going to be able to help you. Miles Sanders is still there, Chuba Hubbard, but Miles and Chuba, they're not really game-changing type of players. 3-down running backs that can really help you. They're more situationally based players. They drafted Xavier Leggett, the wide receiver, in the first round. You never know with wide receivers, especially young ones, if they're able to step in right away or if there's going to be a steep learning curve. Deontay Johnson's a nice player who they added, of course, the former Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a really good route runner. I think he's really good at operating over the short to intermediate levels, and he does have some speed to him. But you have to, I don't know if the surrounding talent's enough to really accentuate what he can do and how he can help your offense. And then Adam Thielen is more of a chain mover. He's obviously on the older side, doesn't have a lot of speed or explosiveness. He's more of the sure-handed, move the chains type of player. And they also drafted a tight end named Jatavian Sanders, who I really like coming out of Texas. He's somebody that I think that young tight ends or tight ends in general are a quarterback's best friend. I just don't know how quickly Jatavian Sanders is going to be able to help because he's not really a well-rounded tight end. I think he needs a lot of work as a blocker, so I don't know how quickly he's even going to see the field.
All right, let's close out with their defense here, which, Carolina's had some good defensive players over the year. You take a look, they got Clowney, who's up in age, obviously. Shaq Thompson's over there. What else stands out? J.C. Horn, by the way, was a player liked at South Carolina a lot. What else stands out about the Carolina defense?
Josie Jewell, who they added, and I know a lot of, there were some questions as to whether he would be a good fit for the Eagles, but he's there. J.C. Horn's a player who I really liked also coming out of the draft. Jordan Fuller's a safety who I thought would have been a good fit in Philadelphia, the former Rams safety. Nevertheless, he ends up in Carolina. So that kind of rounds out that unit. And I just, Jadeveon Clowney's there. He's a journeyman who's oft injured, and I don't know if I think he's more of a situational type of player at this stage of his career, but the Panthers in general don't have enough talent to really contend with some of the other teams in their division.
All right, there you go. It's the North. Not a lot of expectations. Tampa Bay, though, is kind of interesting. Atlanta, I think, is kind of interesting. How do you see this division ending up?
Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New Orleans Saints, and the Carolina Panthers.
Carolina all the way down the bottom. We'll see what ends up happening with the quarterback there, Bryce Young. You draft a guy number 1 overall. You're expecting a lot better than that, and it could be 2 straight last-place finishes for the Carolina Panthers. All right, we are getting down to the end of our division previews. We'll continue them next week with Andrew here, but make sure you follow all of his coverage of the Eagles and training camp over at InsideTheBirds.com. All right, buddy, we'll talk to you next week, pal.
Mike, have a great weekend.
You do the same. Andrew DiCecco, always kind enough to join us for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN.